In today's video, we're going to talk about the differences between buying an apartment in a small versus large building. Both of them have advantages and disadvantages depending on your situation. So stay till the end of this video to find out which one is better for you. What is up, everyone? My name is Sargis. I'm a licensed real estate agent based here in New York City, and this channel is all about New York City real estate when it comes to buying, selling, and renting. Usually when searching apartments for sale, a lot of buyers only look at the interior of the apartment without considering the building size. But the size of the building is one of the important factors, and I always make sure we discuss this with the buyers, because living in a small building is different than living in a large building. So the size of the building is also something you should always consider, and you'll see the important differences in this video. Before we start looking at the differences between large and small buildings, we need to clarify a few things. First, this video is not a comparison between a large building such as condo or a co-op and a small building such as a single family or multifamily townhouse or a detached house. Those are totally different ownership structures. I'll make a separate video on more generic comparison between apartment living versus traditional house living. This video is more niche. This video is more niche down since we're going to keep the ownership structure the same. So today's discussion will be the differences between buying a condo or a co-op apartment in a large building, typically where you have over 100 units up to 1,000 or more, versus buying a condo or a co-op apartment in a small under 5 or 6 unit building. Looking at the building's exterior, there is no way to tell if this building is a condo, co-op, or a townhouse. So when I say small building, I mean typically under 5 or 6 unit building, where the apartments are sold individually and the ownership can be either a condo or a co-op. Now, since we know what we're comparing, we'll take one apartment. As an example, let's say you're looking to buy this 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment and discuss how things are different if the apartment you're looking to buy is in a small versus large building, and which one would be the best for you. The first difference is your monthly carrying costs. Usually apartments in small buildings have lower carrying costs. Large buildings most of the time offer more amenities such as gym, outdoor terrace, common lounge area, kids playroom, pool, etc. Also, it is typical to see a full-time doorman and a live-in super in large buildings. And pretty much all large buildings will have a professional management company. Of course, with large buildings, the cost to run the building plus the amenities, management company, staff salary are spread across more owners. But in general, the apartments in large buildings with a lot of premium amenities have higher carrying costs. If the building is a condo, it's called monthly common charges. If the building is a co-op, it's called monthly maintenance. Typically small, let's say 5-unit buildings, most of the time are self-managed. They don't have doorman or concierge service. There aren't any expensive amenities to maintain. So besides the building's maintenance, there aren't a lot of things to spend money on. Small buildings might hire a part-time super or a handyman who will be responsible for small day-to-day operations such as garbage, recycling, and the maintenance. But in general, not having a management company, a lot of amenities, and staff keeps the carrying cost low. The second difference is the lifestyle. It's always good to try to keep the maintenance of the apartment if it's a co-op or common charges if it's a condo as low as possible, but that comes with its own cost. If you're in a small building, since there are only 3, 4, or 5 units, you typically are more involved in a building's day-to-day operations, maintenance, bookkeeping, finances, etc. And besides the regular day-to-day activities and making sure that the building operates properly, problems also may arise from time to time. Some issues might be urgent and might need your immediate attention. Sometimes you might dedicate your weekend solving the problems in the building. For example, it can be an issue with the heat, or maybe there is a leak in the basement, or something is wrong with the intercom system, and things like that. If you don't want to be involved and deal with those kinds of problems, buying in a large buildings might be a better option for you, where the board and the management company take care of the building's maintenance, financials, bookkeeping, and day-to-day operations. Also, large buildings most of the time have a full-time or live-in super or a handyman who is always on site, and emergency repairs are being handled a lot faster. The other difference is the fact that since in a small building you have fewer apartments, that means you have a fewer people who will volunteer to be a board member. Depending on the bylaws of that specific building, if you're in a, let's say, 4 or 5 unit building, whether you like it or not, every owner might be a board member, and you will be required to take part in the discussions about the building's maintenance and problems. Or the board may consist of 2 or 3 members, and the risks are high that people who volunteer to serve on the board don't have enough knowledge and qualifications to make sure that everything runs smoothly in the building, all the repair and maintenance work is done in a timely manner, and the finances of the building is properly handled. In larger buildings, you have more apartments and therefore more people who will volunteer, and most of the time large buildings will have a dedicated managing agent as well. So the chances are high that you will have a board that consists of competent people, and the board with the managing agent should be able to run the building properly. The other difference is the cost when it comes to any special assessments, and this is an important one. If it's time to do an expensive repair work, let's say on the roof or facade, or buy a new boiler or do any other expensive emergency repairs, there are fewer owners to share the total cost. That's why it's very important to do a proper inspection of the apartment and the building when you're buying in a smaller building, to make sure that you are aware of the building's condition and what to expect. Large buildings where you have a few hundred apartments, they typically have larger reserve funds for any emergency repairs. And if any special assessment needed, since there are more owners to share the total cost, the burden on each apartment owner is not as large. But of course, this depends on the seriousness of the repair, because if there is a serious problem in the foundation or any structural damage, yes, the assessment bill for the owners can be high. But typically, large buildings with professional management companies make plans and budget for those types of expenditures. Next, let's talk about the community, privacy, and dealing with other people. In small buildings, typically you have closer relationship with your neighbors. It's a small community, and sometimes in smaller communities, the problems can be bigger if the owners cannot agree with budgeting and upgrading work. The example can be, let's say in a 4-unit building, 3 owners agree to install new video intercom system and security cameras. But the 4th owner is either planning to sell his or her apartment soon and doesn't need this upgrade, or maybe they just don't want to spend any money, and this upgrade never gets accomplished. The problem is even worse if it's a safety issue. Let's say a crack on the exterior wall, or sidewalk needs to be repaired, or the roof needs a maintenance. And because everyone is involved in a decision-making process and the communication is on a much more personal level, the problem just never gets taken care of because of that one owner. On the other hand, big buildings are less personal and run more like a business and corporation. Next, with small buildings, since there are fewer apartments, every movement is noticeable. I don't know how important this will be to you, but expect your neighbors to know your typical schedule, when you're home, when you're away, when you're having guests, when you're having gatherings, parties, and things like that. Not everyone has an easygoing personality, and if there are any inconveniences caused by the neighbors, there is no intermediary person, so you have to handle the problem yourself. On the other hand, living in a few hundred unit building, you might know your neighbor next door, but you don't have to deal with them if you don't want to. The movements of every single resident aren't really noticeable unless that's your immediate neighbor and causes you any inconvenience. But even in this case, you have a management and board who should be able to handle the situation. Next is the scarcity. Larger buildings usually have apartments listed for sale all the time, and if you're trying to sell your 2-bed, 2-bath apartment in a few hundred unit building, there might be a few more 2-bed, 2-bath apartments listed, so you have more competition. The price that you will be able to sell your apartment for will largely be impacted by the comps in the building. If some of the comparable sales are lower than you would want it to be, it would be hard hard for you to sell your apartment with higher price. Recent sales and current active listings will have a huge impact on the price of your apartment. If you're in a smaller building, you might have apartments for sale in your building every few years. So when it's time to sell your apartment, you might be the only one selling in the building at the time, which means no competition in your building. I'm not saying that there are no comps for your apartment at all and you will be able to sell your apartment with extremely high price, but in general, you'll have more exclusivity when you're selling in a smaller building. The other things to consider are the views, light, and the noise you're getting. Larger buildings can reach further into the sky, which means if you would like to have a beautiful views of the city skyline, have more light, or be as far up in the sky as possible from the street noise, then large building would be a better choice for you. Since typically if we're talking about a brownstone or other type of small building, either a new development or a pre-war building, those are 4 or 5 story buildings, so that's the highest you can be. And a lot of pre-war buildings might not have an elevator, so you should also be okay with going up the stairs in a 4 or 5 story walk-up building. I'm not saying that all apartments in a high-rise buildings have a lots of natural light and amazing views, since it also depends on the location of the building and the location of the apartment itself. But this is just a generalization. In between those two types of buildings, there are also mid-sized buildings, typically the ones under 80 units. With mid-sized buildings, it's very hard to give any general characteristic since it really depends on that specific building in terms of what type of lifestyle you can expect there. You might not be required to deal with day-to-day operation of the building if the building has a competent board and a professional management company. But if, let's say, a 20-unit building is self-managed and you feel like the board isn't doing a great job, or it's hard to find someone to volunteer for the board, you might feel pressured to take the lead. Some mid-sized buildings might also have nice amenities such as full-time doorman, gym, roof deck, outdoor terrace, which of course will make your monthly carrying costs expensive. And some mid-sized buildings might not offer anything, which means a very low operating budget, therefore a low monthly carrying cost. For a lot of people, mid-sized buildings can be a great option depending on what type of lifestyle you want and how that specific building operates. Now back to our topic. I'm not saying that the problems and advantages we discussed with small and large buildings are always the case for every single small and large building, but this video was just for you to have a general understanding and know the risks associated with buying your apartment depending on the size of the building. So always make sure that besides looking at the apartment itself, you also understand how the building operates and what type of lifestyle you can expect if you proceed with your purchase. We just talked about large and small buildings in general, but also keep in mind that there are a lot of differences when it comes to the ownership structure. The buying process and your lifestyle also depend whether you're buying a condo or a co-op apartment, which are two most popular type of residential buildings that you see here in New York City. I've made other videos in this channel about condos and co-ops in details, pros and cons of each, the requirements, and so on. Feel free to watch those videos as well. The links are in the description below. That's it for today's video. Hopefully I was able to provide you some valuable information. And all I ask in return is to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real estate videos like this. Feel free to comment below if you have any questions, and you can reach out to me directly using my email in the description of this video if you need any help with your buying, selling, or renting process, or if you just have questions regarding New York City real estate. And lastly, if you want to know how much money you need to buy an apartment in New York City and what are the buyer closing costs, you can just click the video you see on your screen. Thanks for watching. Until next time.